This is a tutorial on how to build a blockchain explorer. So this is for substrate networks and is a good alternative to subscan. So the issue here is that before most networks are indexed by subscan, it takes a long time. It takes a while, and for example, some networks have been added to the Polkadot parachain and Kusama parachain, but they are not yet on subscan. So this is a good template to get them up and running and have their own blockchain explorer. So the explorer has two components, and first of all, this is what it looks like. We have blocks. We can view the blocks, and we can also view the events and statistics in a particular block and transfers. So we can also view table for statistics. We can view table for events. Transfer has not yet been indexed in this data, but after a while it will be indexed. So, and of course we can check more data and have a good experience for the user compared to the Polkadot app. Polkadot app is decent, but it's not good for most cases. For example, to view a very old block is very difficult. We need to know the transaction, we need to know the hash, etc. And we can also filter the events, etc. So the Explorer has two components. It has the data component and it has the UI component. So the data component is powered by subquery, and the UI component is powered by React. And so I've not pushed the main repo right now, sorry. So the changes that you make in the template are the URLs. For the data, you need to change the endpoint and the genesis hash. So we are going to use a different network as a case study. In this example, I use Basilisk, and we are going to look for another network. I think Infinity is not yet on subscan. Okay, so let's use Infinity as an example. So we're going to switch network. So we need two things. We need the network and we need the genesis hash. To get the network, we can check the documentation of the project, but we can also use the URL because it usually contain the WebSocket endpoint. So let me create a new branch. So you can fork the repository or download it and clone it. So for this tutorial, I'm going to just create a new branch let's call it Infinity. So now we are going to change the network. First of all, we change the endpoint, and then this should be encoded, so it should be this. And to get the genesis hash is the hash of block 0. So to get genesis hash, you can use Polkadot app, and we need to go to developer, RPC cores, and then chain. So we need to get block hash, and we need to get it by the number. So in our case, we want for the block 0, and this is our genesis hash. So we can replace that here, and let's save that and commit. And let's push to Infinity. Origin Infinity. So okay, so next up is how do we deploy our data? And to deploy your subquery, you can use project.subquery.network, and then you create a new subquery project. So let's give this one Infinity Parascan. That's the name we are given to it, and I want to change the user to Parascan. So you need the URL of your subquery. So in our case, it is this, and deployment source, you need to change it to GitHub. So right now, subquery support IPFS. If you prefer IPFS, that's fine. So next up, you can also add subtitle and description, but we are not going to do that right now. So after that, we create project. So next thing is to deploy. So we can deploy to production slot, or we can deploy to staging slot. For most deployment, I prefer staging slot. Then after indexing, I can move it to production. And if you need any information about or questions, you can join the subquery Discord. There are lots of people there willing to help. So we are not going to use the main branch. We are going to use Infinity branch, and you can even change the commit version you want to deploy. But we are going to use the latest commit, which is change network to Infinity. Then we are not using dictionary, and we are not using a different endpoint. So next is deploy update. So let me explain the difference between the production slot and the staging slot. The staging slot is an opportunity to stage your project. For example, if this is the let's put this to production now. Okay, it's not yet indexed, but if you have a production data and people are using the query, we can do a lot of testing in the staging slot and wait till our data is ready before pushing it to the production. And that way, the data won't be broken and apps won't be broken for the end user. So we're going to wait for it to process, and for the UI, you only need to change one thing, and that's in the source, utils, and index.ts. So what we need to change is the endpoint, and we need to change it to the endpoint of our query project, which is this query endpoint. So we'll copy. Let me create a new branch also for the UI. So, and let me change the endpoint. So these are little edits, and you can make these small edits right from GitHub. So this will be broken. Yes, it is. That's because our data is not yet ready. So after some minutes, it's going to process. When it's done, the data should start indexing. So let me explain the components of the subquery and the components of the UI for better customization. So the important thing is this schema and the mappings. So for the mappings, I move them to handlers just to make it neat. So here is where so for a block, we have different components in a block. We have number, we have hash, timestamp, spec version, the root, and of course in an string step we have the block, we have the signer, and we have the section and method, and whether it is successful or not. And events sometimes are attached to extrinsics, but not all the time. And we have transfer. So first of all, let's start with the basic branch. Okay, let's continue. So in the basic branch, it doesn't include transfer. That's because transfer and daily data aggregate is like a plus, and for some network the transfer might not work, but for most, because almost all the substrate I've seen use balances, and balances don't transfer method to transfer their native assets. So here we just create the block. We are calling the functions from the handler. So the handler is where we pass the data. This one pass data for account, this one for block, this one for day, this one for event, extrinsic, and transfer. And in index we do the exporting. So we can use block as an example. So the main components of subql is substrate block, substrate extrinsic, and substrate events. Now we also have frontier AVM and frontier call, yes, which are for EVM data such as transaction and log. That's what it looks like on Etherscan, that the transaction and log on Etherscan. So now subql also support that, but not all network include it in their chain. So the next component is, so next up is the UI, and the UI, we have utilities just to make things easier and simple, and the layout is pages, components, and data. So component is the building block, that's the little detail. So to keep things simple, I only use navigation bar, that's nav bar, which is this navigation, home, blocks, etc. Then we have table, which contains the tabular data, and we have overview, for example, overview of account or blocks. Let's use subscanner as an example. So this section is what I call overview. So it's for general information about a block or extrinsic or an account. Then loading is when the data is loading, and error is for error notification. Then data is where we make the queries and pass it and also put it into the component. And pages is each file in the pages folder is a page. So, and they are linked in app.tsx. So for example, blocks /blocks will give us the blocks component, /extrinsics will give us the extrinsic component, block, then block number like /block /20 will give us the block component, etc, etc, etc. So let's check our data is still processing. It will take a while, but when it's done, just like the basilisk, it would give us the everything we want. We can check from the root, view blocks, view extrinsics, we can view all events, and there are some things. Some of the ways you can also improve this UI is to add filters such as system extrinsic success, or using subscanner as a case study. So filters can easily be used also with subquery, but it depends on how you want your user experience to go. Let me use the one I got running, basilisk, as an example again. Basilisk parascan, okay. So wow, actually our production and staging slot here. So let's view on subquery explorer. So we can filter by section, and personally I like using studio.apollo.graphql. For me, it's easy to make edits and add variables and a lot of things. It's just a personal preference. Not logging right now, but so if you look at query and we look at let's say events, nodes, total account, aggregate, not yet. Okay, accounts. So you can filter, and you can filter by ID. You should be able to filter by let me check. Trying to sign in with GitHub. Okay. I don't think I have. Okay, we have. Okay, this one is basic. It doesn't contain transfer, etc. Well, sometimes it takes time to load. And let's check if you need to whether it has finished loading. Sometimes you might get error, and the Discord is a wonderful channel for subquery. There's technical support in subquery Discord, so you can get support on how to run your subquery, how to deploy, etc. And sometimes they can help you in your application too. A lot of times, actually, I've received help there too. Okay, so now you can check events, filter, and yes, we can filter by section. Let's create a new subquery. We can filter by section, and we can filter by method. So let's check balances, and nodes, ID, section, method, invalid value. Okay, sorry, it's supposed to be equal to balances. Unfortunately, I don't know which. Okay, yes, so we have balances, withdraw. So transfer is not yet. So we can also filter by section and filter by method. So this one will be transfer. There's no transfer event at the moment. And to make your query faster, there are transfers. So that means there's an issue with my subquery. I will resolve the issue before. I'll resolve the issue soon. So you can filter by section, method, anything. So you can, to make query faster, you can also index which field you will filter by. So our example is still running, but that's all. So I hope you guys have a great time. So as a recap, you need two components to run the blockchain explorer. You need the subquery component and the UI component. In the subquery component, you will change the I have the wrong RPC in our example. So you need to change the network, and that's in the project.yaml file. So you need to change the endpoint, and you need to change the genesis hash. And for the UI component, you need to change the endpoint, which is in utils index. So that's all. Thank you very much.